Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Shadow Chronicles. Join me on this thrilling journey into spine-chilling stories and eerie tales. And please support the channel by subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's embrace the darkness together and dive into the stories. Today's topic is night shift horror stories. Many of you may work the night shift. I regrettably used to work at a hotel in my town, which had been hit by a hurricane a few months back. Many houses were badly damaged, and a lot of people vacated the area. The hotel is about a 20-minute walk from my house, but I'll leave out the town and hotel names to avoid being traced. The hotel was a standard bed and breakfast type place, serving wet scrambled eggs, frozen sausages, and assorted cereals. After the hurricane, the hotel had a busy month as some people were displaced, but things eventually quieted down, quieter than before the storm. I always worked nights from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., with someone relieving me at 2 a.m. to work until 10 o'clock or 11 a.m. At that time, there were maybe 9 rooms checked in, which wasn't a lot, so I could go the whole night without seeing anyone. There was a break room for employees with a coffee machine, fridge, table, and a couple of sofas. I spent most of my time back there. One night, while I was in the break room, I heard a deep voice from the lobby saying hello repeatedly. I got up and walked to the front desk, where I saw a man on the other side of the glass barrier. He said he needed towels, so I grabbed a couple of extra towels and slid them under the glass for him. He grabbed them aggressively, shot me a weird look, and then walked toward the room hallway that I returned to the lobby and sat in a rolling chair by the monitors, watching the man on camera as he walked down the hallway, looking around strangely. I was taken aback when I saw him rubbing the towels on his face. Confused, I muttered, "What in the world?" He then got into the elevator, and I decided to go back to the break room. About 10 minutes later, I heard the same voice again from the lobby. The man was standing outside the glass, saying loudly, "My key card is broken." When I asked for his room number, he gave me something random like 2C, but our hotel room strictly had numbers, no letters. I knew he was lying. When I told him this, his reaction was shocking. He threw the towels on the floor, smiled slightly, and leaned closer to the glass. With a smile on his face, he said, "I'm going to kill you." He repeated it, each time louder until it became a scream. I screamed back, "I'm calling the police," and picked up the phone to dial 911. He continued to mock me as I explained the situation to the dispatcher. Then, with a disturbing smile, he walked slowly toward the door. Once he was gone, I told the dispatcher he had left. She asked if I still wanted the police to come, and I said no. The next few hours dragged on, so I decided to stay in the lobby instead of going back to the break room. Around 2 a.m., my relief arrived, and I clocked out, ready to go home. As I walked outside to the cold parking lot, I wished I had brought my coat. I had my hands in the pockets of my light jacket and my hood up when I heard a voice coming from a line of bushes covering the hotel's first-floor windows. I didn't care what the voice said, so I walked faster. Once I got out of the parking lot, I was on a main road for a brief minute, but there were no cars. The town was quiet at that hour. After a minute, I turned left down a residential street that would eventually lead to my block. It was dead silent, except for the sound of my shoes hitting the pavement, and then I heard someone else's shoes behind me, running as if trying to be quiet. When I turned around, they stopped. There was a car right behind me, and I sensed someone hiding behind it. I heard laughing, followed by a familiar voice saying quietly, "I'm going to kill you." Without even seeing him, I knew it was that man. I looked around for my next move. I couldn't outrun him in my work shoes, but I spotted a house with an upstairs light on. Someone was awake. I decided to run and ring the doorbell for help. I reached the front door and rang the bell 3 times. That's when the man grabbed me, choking me and whispering in my ear, "Die." In that moment, my life flashed before my eyes. Then, an angel in the form of a man opened the door and screamed at the man choking me. His grip loosened, and I fell to the floor. That I never turned to see the man run away, but the man from the house helped me inside, gave me water, and called the police. I explained the whole story to them, and they collected the CCTV footage from the hotel to track the man down. Later, I was called into the police station for a lineup of people who resembled the man in the footage. After looking at all 5 of them for about 5 minutes, I ultimately said none of them were him. I don't know if the pressure and nerves got to me, but in that moment, I truly didn't recognize him. To this day, I hope I didn't make a mistake and let that man roam free, that I work in the pro department of a home improvement company, closing shifts with another cashier I'll call Nicole. Nicole is really kind but quite timid, and she's also very pretty, so she often gets hit on by contractors. Usually, it's nothing worrisome, just a few compliments or a dinner invite that she politely declines. I might ask her out too, if it weren't for one detail. Nicole has a girlfriend. This makes her uncomfortable with the constant attention. When we first met, I suggested she tell those guys about being gay, but she said it wasn't any of their business, so she kept that part of herself private. Nicole has become my best friend, and having another cashier there makes things less lonely. We even cover for each other during lunch breaks. One day, when I returned from lunch, Nicole told me about a rather creepy guy who had been flirting with her. She said she politely turned him down, explaining she was with someone, but he didn't seem happy and left. I shrugged it off as just another typical guy and laughed. Later that day, the man came back. Nicole wasn't there. She had gone to help a customer find some lumber, so it was just me. He looked rather normal, probably handsome to most women, but he was acting strangely. After looking around, I asked if I could help him with anything. He replied, "I'm here to see Nicole." When I asked how he knew her, he claimed he had come in earlier and she had said yes to his invitation. So he returned to pick her up, and I told him that Nicole had left for the day, the usual lie we tell to cover for our friends. His smile faded, replaced by annoyance. He insisted he wanted to speak to Nicole and ask her out again, contradicting what he had just told me about her rejecting his previous invitation. I told him he could not do that, which caused him to cross his arms and ask why not. I'm not the best liar when it comes to making up excuses on the spot, and I didn't want to reveal that Nicole was gay if she didn't want him to know. So, I blurted out that Nicole was my fiancée. His annoyed expression turned to confusion as he asked how someone as pretty as she was could be with someone like me. I don't think I'm that bad looking, but I shrugged it off and told him it didn't matter. I added that we were getting married in a couple of months, so he needed to back off. He gave me a death glare, but remained silent. After an awkward pause, he left. When Nicole returned, I told her what had happened. She asked me to describe him, and when I did, she realized that it was the same guy who had come in before. She was a bit creeped out, but found my fiancé excuse rather funny. She even said she'd rather be engaged to me than go out with him, which I took as a compliment. That a couple of weeks went by, and we had all but forgotten about the man. But one night, after it had gotten dark, Nicole and I were taking out the trash so we could close down the registers and go home. Suddenly, we heard a loud bang at the door, causing both of us to nearly jump out of our skins. It was the guy again, his wild eyes pressed against the glass. "We're closed," I told him, but he insisted he needed to come in. Nicole yelled again, telling him she wasn't interested and to leave her alone. He shouted back that he wasn't there for her, but for me. He then said that if he could take out her husband, then she'd be all his. Based on that, I realized he wanted to kill me. I told Nicole to run to the manager's office and call the police while I stayed to watch him. That I won't lie, I was terrified to be in that tiny office alone. The guy wasn't the biggest, but he could have had a weapon, and the store didn't allow us to carry any self-defense items. The man then started ramming the sliding doors like a maniac, causing them to rattle as if they were about to come off their hinges. Just then, Nicole returned with a 2x4 in her hands, yelling that the cops were on their way. Finally, the man decided to leave. The closing manager met the officers when they arrived and took them to review the security footage. Thankfully, the man was caught and arrested, but neither Nicole nor I felt safe working there anymore. We remained friends and even attended the same college, but we found separate jobs to pay our way through classes. I'm grateful she was there to help me with that rogue man, as I can't imagine what he might have done to me, or worse, what he might have done to her. She mentioned she was glad I was there too, as having a guy around tends to make men like him less confident in their actions. This was a wake-up call for me about how dangerous it can be for some girls when an interested guy just doesn't want to take no for an answer. This incident happened a little over 2 years ago, and I wanted to share it somewhere to look back on and never forget the lesson I learned. It was 2016, and I had just started a new job at a motel. The pay was low, but I needed an office job. A friend, Michael, helped me get the position. For a few days, I trained with the owner in the mornings, and for 2 nights, Michael trained me. Our shift was from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., which involved checking guests in and doing paperwork. The owner went away on vacation for a week, which is why I had to endure such swift training. It was my first night alone on the night shift. The office had a monitor with security cameras around the motel property and large glass windows all around, including a glass door. No night window like most motels have. That IT was fairly early in the night, around 1 a.m., and I was doing my usual check-in paperwork when a man walked in and asked if we had any rooms available. Usually, if someone seemed sketchy, my boss had me lie and say no. But he seemed normal at the moment, so I said yes. He replied that he wanted just one room, so I began creating the reservation on the computer. That's when I noticed he started swatting the air and making spitting noises as if he was surrounded by flies. I tried to ignore it. It wasn't my business, so I checked him into the room as quickly as possible. I handed him his key, and he was on his way to AT that time. I was quite timid, dealing with a lot in my personal life, so you can understand my reaction to what happened next. The man came back from his room and slammed his hand on the glass door, startling me. I looked up to see him staring at me. He cracked the door and put his head through, demanding to know why I wouldn't let him into his room. Trying to be helpful, I replied that maybe there was something wrong with his key, and I offered to give him another one. The look in his eyes was indescribable. I felt like I was in danger. I handed him the new key, and he went back to his room. In a panic, I tried texting Michael for guidance, but it was the middle of the night, and he was asleep. With no reply, I noticed the man trudging down the stairs toward me again, and I went into absolute panic mode. I ran into the back office, locked the door, and pulled out my pocket knife. It's important to keep protection when working at night. That I heard the man yelling, "Hello? Why won't you let me into my room? Do you not like me?" Being foolish and not standing my ground, I decided to handle it alone. I replied that I was just on the phone and would be right out. I kept calling Michael over and over, but there was still no answer. Taking a few breaths, I stepped out of the office, but the man was not there. He was in the bathroom. I started hearing him talking to himself angrily, saying, kill her, kill her." My heart sank. Still being an idiot and not calling the police, I waited for him to come out. When he did, I said, "Your key was broken. I'm sorry. Let me escort you to your room." He agreed. Thankfully, I was wearing a long-sleeved sweater so I could hide my knife in my hand while holding it. I walked outside, and he insisted on walking behind me. As we made our way to the staircase, I was sweating from nerves, continuously looking back to ensure he wouldn't make a move. He stopped at one room, and I stopped at his room a few doors down. Smiling, I said, "Oh, that's the wrong room. This is yours," as it was clearly labeled on the door. All this time, he had been trying to open someone else's room. After letting him into his room, I quickly ran back to the office and locked the door. That I later found out that a lone woman was staying in the other room he had tried to get into. The next guest I checked in was a police officer from a nearby town. I confided in him about the man, and he was willing to keep an eye out. The following night, the man returned, but I had the doors locked and told him we were all booked up. I explained everything to my boss when he returned from vacation, but he didn't take it seriously. I continued to work there on the night shift for another year, during which I had many other strange encounters, but this was one of the worst.